The fluorescent lights in my tech repair shop buzzed like angry wasps at 11:30 p.m. I should have been home hours ago, but the Hendersons' laptop had been giving me trouble all week, and I'd rather fix it than listen to Lydia complain about our finances again. Funny how she never complained when I funded her yoga studio. I was elbow-deep in circuit boards when I heard her voice drifting through the thin wall that separated my shop from the parking lot. She must have been sitting in her car, windows down in the humid August air. "Brady, you know my family comes first. He's just second, always will be." I froze, screwdriver halfway to a loose connection. Brady, the flashy real estate agent who'd been sniffing around town lately, driving that ridiculous red Corvette and wearing suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Second place?" I muttered to myself, setting down the screwdriver. "Hell, I didn't even medal." Through the grimy window, I watched Lydia pace beside her white BMW, the one I'd helped her finance 2 years ago. Her yoga pants clung to her like a second skin, and she kept tossing her blonde hair over her shoulder the way she did when she was lying to me about where she'd been. "I know, baby, I know," she cooed into the phone. "But we have to be careful. He's not stupid, just trusting." Trusting. The word hit me like a wrench to the gut. 34 years old, and I'd spent the last 8 of them being the kind of husband who believed his wife when she said she was working late at the studio, the kind who never checked bank statements too closely because he figured marriage meant partnership. "The restaurant's anniversary party is next weekend," Lydia continued. "Everyone will be there. We can figure out our next move then." Our next move. I leaned against my workbench, feeling the familiar weight of my mother's old toolbox beneath my palm. Mom had run this shop before me, back when it was Henderson Electronics, and actually made money. She'd always told me that trust was like a circuit board. Once you fried the connections, you couldn't just solder them back together and expect them to work the same way. Lydia's conversation wrapped up with enough sweet nothings to make a diabetic sick. I watched her climb into the BMW and drive off toward our house, the one with the mortgage I'd been paying alone since her yoga studio started building its client base. I locked up the shop and drove home in my pickup truck, windows down, trying to figure out when I'd become the kind of man whose wife talked about him like he was a piece of furniture. Reliable, functional, but ultimately replaceable. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Lydia's car sat in the garage, and through the kitchen window I could see the blue glow of her phone screen. She was probably texting Brady, planning their next secret meeting while I'd been fixing other people's broken electronics. I sat in the truck for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The neighborhood was quiet, except for Mrs. Walsh's television blaring through her living room window. She was probably watching one of those late-night talk shows, gathering ammunition for tomorrow's gossip sessions at the grocery store. When I finally went inside, Lydia was already in bed, phone face down on her nightstand. She'd left the kitchen light on for me, a small kindness that somehow made everything worse. "How was your day?" she asked when I slipped under the covers. "Productive," I said. "Fixed a lot of broken connections." She made a sleepy humming sound and rolled away from me. Within minutes, she was breathing deeply, probably dreaming about Brady and his Corvette and whatever future they'd been planning without me. I stared at the ceiling fan, counting the rotations and thinking about trust and circuit boards, and the way my mother used to say that every problem had a solution. You just had to be patient enough to find it. The next morning, Lydia was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the coffee maker. "Early class at the studio, love you." Love you. 2 words that used to mean something, now just ink on paper. I drove to the shop and spent the morning pretending to work while actually thinking. By lunch, I'd made a decision that would have made my mother proud, or horrified, depending on how you looked at it. I was going to find out exactly what my wife and Brady were planning, and then I was going to show them both what second place really looked like. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The yoga studio sat on Harbor Street like a glass and chrome monument to Lydia's ambitions. I'd written the check for the down payment 3 years ago, back when she'd convinced me that wellness was the future and our little seaside town needed a place for people to find their inner peace. Looking at it now, with its pretentious Sanskrit quotes painted on the windows and its overpriced meditation cushions visible through the front door, I wondered how I'd ever believed that Lydia cared about anyone's inner peace besides her own. It was Thursday afternoon, and I knew she'd be teaching her advanced class until 5. That gave me an hour to do what I should have done months ago, look around the place I'd helped build. The spare key was still hidden under the fake rock by the back entrance. Lydia had never been creative about security, which was ironic considering how many secrets she'd been keeping. The studio smelled like lavender and lies. I made my way past the main room, where mirrors reflected empty yoga mats arranged in perfect rows, and headed for the small office in the back. Lydia's desk was organized chaos, receipts scattered between inspirational books, client files mixed with product catalogs. But it was the locked drawer that caught my attention. The same drawer she'd been protective about for months, claiming it held boring business stuff. Whenever I'd asked about it. The lock was cheap, the kind you could pick with a paperclip if you had the patience. Fortunately, I'd learned patience from years of fixing delicate electronics. Inside the drawer, I found a second phone. Not just any phone, a sleek smartphone in a pink case, the kind Lydia claimed to hate because it was too flashy, the kind that suggested this wasn't just a backup device for business calls. I powered it on, and my suspicions were confirmed. No password protection, because Lydia had never imagined I'd be smart enough to look for it. The text messages told a story that made my stomach clench. Months of conversations with Brady, starting innocent enough but quickly escalating into the kind of explicit exchanges that left no room for interpretation. Pictures I'd rather not have seen, plans for weekend getaways that coincided with Lydia's supposed yoga retreats, and financial discussions that made my head spin. But it was the bank transfer records that really caught my attention. Lydia had been moving money, our money, into an account I'd never seen before. Small amounts at first, then larger chunks that added up to more than I'd made in the past 6 months. Brady's having some cash flow problems, read one message from 2 weeks ago. Can you help him out until the Morrison deal closes? Brady's response: You're amazing, babe. This is just temporary. Once we're together, you'll never have to worry about money again. Together. The words sat in my chest like a stone. I scrolled further back, looking for the beginning of this betrayal, and found something even worse. A conversation from 4 months ago, right around the time Lydia had started pushing me to refinance the house. He's so trusting, Lydia had written. Signed the papers without even reading them. The equity should cover everything we need for the new place. The new place. I thought about the real estate listings I'd seen scattered around Brady's office, the ones for condos in Florida and houses in North Carolina, places far from our little seaside town and the life we'd built together. I took pictures of everything. The messages, the bank records, the photos that proved my wife had been living a double life while I'd been fixing other people's broken electronics and paying for her dreams. By the time I locked the drawer and replaced the key under its fake rock, I felt like a different person. The trusting husband who'd walked into the studio an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone harder and smarter and considerably less interested in playing fair. I drove back to my shop and spent the rest of the afternoon researching Brady Morrison, real estate agent and destroyer of marriages. Social media made it easy. The man documented his life like he was running for office, posting pictures of expensive dinners and weekend trips that I now realized my wife had been funding. But the most interesting thing I learned about Brady was that he wasn't as successful as he pretended to be. A little digging into public records showed a pattern of deals falling through, client complaints, and financial troubles that explained why he needed Lydia's money. He was using her, and she was using me, and somewhere in that chain of deception was an opportunity for someone patient enough to find it. I was still researching when Lydia came home that evening, glowing with what I now recognized as post-Brady satisfaction rather than post-yoga serenity. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably been on Brady's mouth hours earlier. "Enlightening," I said. "Fixed a lot of problems I didn't even know existed." She smiled and headed for the shower, probably washing off the evidence of her afternoon activities. I sat at the kitchen table, looking at the photos on my phone and thinking about trust and patience and the way my mother used to say that every action had an equal and opposite reaction. Brady and Lydia thought they were playing chess while I played checkers. Time to show them that I'd been studying the board longer than they realized. Friday night at Morrison's family restaurant was always busy, but the place was packed for their monthly wine tasting event. Half the town had turned out to sample overpriced bottles and pretend they could tell the difference between a Pinot Grigio and a Sauvignon Blanc. I'd been coming to these events for 3 years, back when I thought supporting Lydia's family business was part of being a good husband. Tonight, I had different reasons for being there. Lydia sat at a corner table with her parents, Jack and Donna Morrison, looking like the perfect daughter-in-law in her little black dress and pearl earrings. She'd spent an hour getting ready, claiming she wanted to represent the studio well at family events. What she'd really wanted was to look good for Brady, who was holding court near the bar, regaling a group of potential clients with stories about his latest property deals. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than I made in a week, and his smile was the kind that made people want to trust him with their life savings. I'd been watching them all evening, noting the careful way they avoided direct eye contact, the casual brushes of hands when they passed each other, the secret smiles that they thought no one else would notice. Mrs. Walsh noticed, though. She sat 2 tables away, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she sipped her wine and filed away ammunition for next week's gossip sessions. "David!" Jack Morrison's voice boomed across the restaurant. "Come over here and settle an argument for us." I made my way to their table, nodding at the other diners who'd known me since I was a kid, fixing their VCRs and computer monitors. Small-town life meant everyone knew your business, which could be a blessing or a curse, depending on what kind of business you were conducting. "What's the argument?" I asked, taking the empty chair beside Lydia. "Donna thinks we should expand the catering menu," Jack said. "Add more vegetarian options, maybe some of that health food nonsense. I say people come here for real food, not rabbit feed." "David knows about business," Lydia said, her hand finding mine under the table. "He's been so supportive of the studio." Supportive. The word tasted bitter in my mouth, especially knowing where my support payments had really been going. "Speaking of the studio," Donna Morrison said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "how's business been lately? Lydia mentioned you might be expanding." I looked at my wife, noting the slight flush in her cheeks. "Expanding?" "Just some ideas I've been exploring," Lydia said quickly. "Nothing definite." "Brady's been helping her look at some properties," Jack added, gesturing toward the bar where our local real estate expert was still entertaining his audience. "Sharp young man, knows the market better than anyone." "I'll bet he does," I thought, watching Brady laugh at his own joke while mentally calculating how much of my money he'd spent on that suit. "Actually," I said, standing up and raising my wine glass, "I'd like to make a toast." The restaurant gradually quieted as people turned their attention toward our table. Lydia's hand tightened on mine, and I could feel her tension radiating through her fingers. "To family," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "To the people who know us best, who support us through thick and thin, and who always tell us the truth, even when it hurts." "To family," the room echoed, glasses raised in solidarity. But I wasn't finished. "And to trust," I continued, my eyes finding Brady's across the room. "To the faith we place in the people we love, and the confidence that they'll never betray that faith for their own selfish interests." Brady's smile faltered slightly. Lydia's hand had gone rigid in mine. "Because trust," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket and pulling out Lydia's secret phone, "is the foundation of every relationship worth having." I set the phone on the table with a soft click that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent restaurant. Lydia's face went white. "David, what are you—" "I found this in your office," I said calmly, "along with some very interesting bank records and text messages that I think everyone here would find educational." Jack Morrison's face was turning red. "What the hell is going on?" "What's going on," I said, unlocking the phone and scrolling to one of Brady's more explicit messages, "is that your daughter has been funding her boyfriend's lifestyle with money she stole from our joint accounts." I handed the phone to Jack, watching his expression change as he read the evidence of his daughter's betrayal. Around us, the restaurant had gone completely quiet except for the soft clink of wine glasses being set down on tables. "Brady Morrison," I called across the room, "would you like to explain to everyone how you've been spending my wife's money, or should I read some of these messages out loud?" Brady started moving toward the exit, but Mrs. Walsh and several other diners had positioned themselves between him and the door. Small-town justice was swift and merciless, especially when it involved adultery and financial betrayal. "This is insane," Lydia hissed, grabbing for the phone. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a point," I said, standing up and addressing the room. "For 8 years, I've been the reliable husband, the one who pays the bills, supports the dreams, and never asks too many questions. But reliability, it turns out, is just another word for stupid." I pulled out my own phone and opened the folder where I'd saved screenshots of every incriminating message and bank transfer. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I present to you the true story of Morrison's Family Restaurant, where family comes first, unless there's money involved." The next few minutes were chaos. Jack Morrison lunged for Brady, who was trying to explain himself while backing toward the kitchen. Donna Morrison started crying, demanding to know how much money was involved. Lydia alternated between denying everything and blaming me for violating her privacy. And through it all, I stood calmly at the center of the storm, feeling more alive than I had in months. "David," Lydia pleaded, grabbing my arm, "please, we can work this out. It's not what you think." I looked down at her, this woman I'd loved and trusted and supported for 8 years, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "You're right," I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. "It's not what I think. It's exactly what I know." I walked toward the exit, leaving behind the chaos and the shouting and the wreckage of my marriage. Behind me, I could hear Mrs. Walsh already spreading the news to anyone who hadn't been in the restaurant to witness it firsthand. By morning, everyone in town would know the truth about Lydia Morrison and Brady Morrison and the reliable husband who'd finally stopped being reliable. But this was just the beginning. I had bigger plans for my cheating wife and her broke boyfriend, plans that would make tonight's public humiliation look like a gentle warning. After all, I'd learned patience from years of fixing broken electronics. And Brady and Lydia were about to discover just how thoroughly I could dismantle something when I put my mind to it. The beauty of living in a small town is that news travels faster than gossip, and gossip travels at the speed of light. By Saturday morning, my phone had 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, and one very angry voicemail from Lydia's lawyer threatening legal action if I didn't return her stolen property. I was sitting in my shop, drinking coffee and reading the messages, when my sister Jennifer burst through the front door like a hurricane in Scrubs. She'd just gotten off her night shift at the hospital, and her red hair was pulled back in the messy bun that meant she was either exhausted or furious. "Holy hell, David," she said, slamming a bag of donuts on my counter. "Mrs. Walsh called me at 6 a.m. to tell me about last night. Please tell me you didn't actually steal Lydia's phone." "I didn't steal anything," I said, offering her a cup of coffee. "I borrowed it temporarily to expose the truth. The truth being that your wife is a cheating, money-stealing witch who's been playing house with Brady Morrison? That's a fairly accurate summary, yes?" Jennifer sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk, the one I kept for customers who needed to wait while I diagnosed their problems. "I never liked her," she said finally. "Too polished, you know? Like she was always performing instead of just being herself. You never told me that. You were happy, or I thought you were." She studied my face with the same intensity she used to examine patients in the ER. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I said, and realized I meant it. Turns out there's something liberating about having your worst suspicions confirmed. "What's your next move?" I pulled out my laptop and showed her the research I'd been doing since dawn. Bank records, real estate transactions, social media posts, all the digital breadcrumbs that Brady and Lydia had left behind. "Brady's in serious financial trouble," I explained. 3 deals fell through in the past 6 months. He owes money to half the contractors in town, and his car payments are 6 weeks behind. So he was using Lydia for money. And she was using me. It's a beautiful system, really. Everyone gets what they want except the person actually earning the money. Jennifer scrolled through the documents, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "This is worse than I thought," she said. "They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to disappear with your money." "Our money, technically. But yes, that appears to have been the plan. So what are you going to do about it?" I closed the laptop and looked out the window at Harbor Street, where the morning shoppers were already gathering outside the bakery and the hardware store. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems like broken appliances and overdue bills. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve," I said, "but I'm going to do it legally, publicly, and thoroughly." That sounds ominous. It should. The first phase of my plan began that afternoon. I drove to Brady's office, a converted Victorian house on Elm Street that he shared with 2 other real estate agents. His red Corvette was parked out front, gleaming in the afternoon sun like a monument to poor financial decisions. I'd brought my toolbox. It's amazing what you can accomplish with the right tools and 15 minutes of privacy. A little sugar in the gas tank, some creative rewiring of the electrical system, and a few strategic cuts to the brake lines. Nothing dangerous, just enough to ensure the car wouldn't start and would require expensive repairs. But the real masterpiece was what I left in the trunk, a cooler full of fish heads from the marina, carefully positioned to maximize the smell and minimize the chance of discovery until the damage was done. I was back in my shop by 3 o'clock, working on a legitimate repair job when my phone rang. "You son of a gun!" Brady's voice was shrill with rage. "I know it was you." "Brady," I said calmly, not looking up from the circuit board I was soldering. "How nice to hear from you. How's your car running?" "You know exactly how my car is running. It's not, and it smells like a fish market." "That's terrible. Have you considered calling a mechanic?" "I'm calling the police." "That's probably wise. Vandalism is a serious crime. I hope they catch whoever did it." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Brady's voice came back, lower and more dangerous. "This isn't over, David." "No," I agreed. "It's not?" I hung up and went back to my soldering, humming quietly to myself. Phase 1 was complete, and I was already looking forward to Phase 2. That evening, Lydia came to the shop. She looked tired and stressed, her usual perfect appearance slightly frayed around the edges. The events of the past 24 hours were taking their toll. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "I'm listening." "This has gone far enough. What you did last night was humiliating and cruel. What I did was tell the truth. I thought you believed in honesty and transparency. Isn't that what you're always preaching at the yoga studio?" She flinched. "That's different." "How?" "Because—" She struggled for words, probably trying to find a way to justify 8 months of lies and theft. "Because it's complicated." "It's really not," I said, setting down my tools and giving her my full attention. "You wanted Brady more than you wanted our marriage. You wanted his lifestyle more than you wanted our life. And you wanted my money to pay for both. It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "How was it supposed to happen? Were you going to ask for a divorce before or after you'd emptied our bank accounts?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I want half of everything," she said finally. "The house, the business, the savings. I'm entitled to half." "You're entitled to whatever a judge decides you're entitled to," I said. "But given that you've been stealing from our joint accounts to fund your boyfriend's gambling debts, I'm thinking that might not be as much as you're hoping for." "I never stole anything." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken of her secret bank transfers. $15,000, I said. "Moved from our savings account to Brady's checking account over the past 4 months. Want to explain to a judge how that's not stealing?" Her face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "David, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out." "No," I said simply. "We can't." "Why not?" I looked at this woman I'd loved for 8 years, this stranger who'd been living in my house and spending my money while planning a future that didn't include me. "Because trust is like a circuit board," I said, echoing my mother's old wisdom. "Once you fry the connections, you can't just solder them back together and expect them to work the same way." She left without another word, and I went back to my repairs. Outside, the sun was setting over our little seaside town, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded me of fire. Beautiful and destructive, just like the plans I was making for Monday morning. Monday morning brought the kind of crisp September weather that made tourists wish they could stay in our little town forever. The harbor sparkled in the early sunlight. Fishing boats bobbed peacefully at their moorings, and the air smelled like salt water and new beginnings. It was the perfect day for the town's annual Founders' Day festival, a celebration that brought together everyone from the mayor to the teenagers who worked at the ice cream stand. Local businesses set up booths along Harbor Street, the high school band played patriotic songs, and the whole community gathered to celebrate another year of small-town survival. It was also the perfect day for the final phase of my plan. I'd spent Sunday making preparations, calling in favors from old friends, and setting up equipment that would ensure maximum impact for what I had in mind. Ray Morrison, who owned the Anchor Bar and had been my friend since high school, had been particularly helpful once I'd explained the situation. "Brady Morrison's been running tabs all over town," Ray had told me. "Guy owes money to everyone from the hardware store to the dry cleaner. If you're planning what I think you're planning, you'll have plenty of support." The festival officially started at 10 a.m. with the mayor's welcome speech from the makeshift stage in Harbor Park. By 11, the crowd had swelled to include most of the town's 3,000 residents, plus tourists and summer people who'd stayed late to enjoy the last warm weekend of the season. I waited until noon, when the crowd was at its peak, and everyone was gathered around the stage for the annual Business Awards ceremony. Lydia was there with her parents, trying to maintain her dignity despite the whispers and stares that had been following her all weekend. Brady stood near the back of the crowd, probably hoping to avoid another confrontation. That's when I made my move. I'd borrowed Ray's sound equipment and set it up behind the stage, connected to my laptop and a wireless microphone that I'd clipped to my shirt. When the current speaker finished announcing the winner of the Best Local Business Award, I stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the park, "I'd like to take a moment to talk about trust." The crowd turned toward me, surprised but not alarmed. I was a familiar face, a local business owner who'd been part of this community my whole life. They had no reason to expect what came next. "Trust," I continued, "is what makes a community work. We trust our neighbors to watch our houses when we're away. We trust our local businesses to treat us fairly. We trust our spouses to honor their vows and our friends to have our backs." I could see Lydia pushing through the crowd toward the stage, her face pale with panic. Brady was moving too, but in the opposite direction, trying to reach his car. "But what happens when that trust is broken?" I asked, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the sound system. "What happens when the people we love most decide to betray us for their own selfish gain?" "David, stop!" Lydia shouted from the front of the crowd. "Don't do this." "Don't do what?" I asked innocently. Don't tell the truth. Don't expose the lies that have been poisoning our community. Don't give everyone the information they need to make informed decisions about who they trust with their money and their hearts. I pressed play on my phone, and Brady's voice filled the park through the speakers. She's so naive, his recorded voice said clearly. Thinks I actually care about her yoga studio and her stupid small-town dreams. Once we get to Florida, I'll dump her and keep the money. The crowd gasped. I'd spent hours editing together the most damaging excerpts from Brady and Lydia's text messages, creating an audio montage that told the complete story of their betrayal. That's not real, Brady shouted from somewhere in the back of the crowd. He faked those recordings. Did I? I asked, holding up Lydia's secret phone. These are actual voice messages, Brady. Your actual voice, talking about your actual plans to steal my money and abandon my wife once you'd used her for everything she was worth. The next recording was even more damaging. Lydia's voice, discussing how easy it was to manipulate me into refinancing the house and giving her access to our savings. He's so trusting, her recorded voice said. He'll sign anything I put in front of him. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll be long gone. The crowd was getting restless now, angry murmurs rippling through the park as people realized they'd been watching a real-life drama unfold in their community. Mrs. Walsh was taking notes, probably already planning her phone calls for later that afternoon. But here's the thing about trust, I said, walking to the edge of the stage so everyone could see me clearly. Once it's broken, it affects everyone. How many of you have done business with Brady Morrison? How many of you have trusted him with your real estate transactions, your investments, your dreams of finding the perfect home? Hands went up throughout the crowd. Brady's face was visible now, red with rage and humiliation as his former clients stared at him with new understanding. And how many of you have supported Lydia's yoga studio, taken classes, bought memberships, recommended her services to your friends? More hands went up. Lydia was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks as she realized the full scope of what I was doing. Well, I have some bad news for you, I said, pulling out a folder full of documents. The yoga studio is bankrupt. Has been for months. The money you've been paying for classes, it's been going to cover Brady's gambling debts and fund their escape plan. I started reading from the financial records I'd discovered, detailing every transaction, every lie, every theft that had been committed in the name of love and ambition. The crowd was getting ugly now. People were shouting questions, demanding answers, surrounding Brady and Lydia like an angry mob seeking justice. But I wasn't finished. There's one more thing, I said, raising my voice to cut through the chaos. As of this morning, I am the new owner of both the yoga studio and Morrison's family restaurant. The park went silent. Both businesses defaulted on their loans last week, I explained. Turns out, when you steal money from your operating accounts to fund your boyfriend's lifestyle, you can't make your mortgage payments. The bank was happy to sell me both properties at a significant discount. Jack Morrison was pushing through the crowd now, his face purple with rage. That's impossible. We never missed a payment. Check your accounts, Jack, I said calmly. Your daughter has been moving money around for months. The restaurant's been running on credit and borrowed time. I pulled out the final piece of my revenge, the architectural plans I'd commissioned over the weekend. I'm converting both properties into something this community actually needs, I announced. The yoga studio will become a tech training center for local kids who want to learn computer repair and programming, and the restaurant will be transformed into a community center and food bank, named after my mother, who actually understood what it meant to serve others. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. My mother had been beloved in this town, known for her kindness and generosity. Naming the community center after her was a stroke of genius that turned public opinion completely in my favor. Brady and Lydia were trapped in the center of the crowd now, surrounded by angry former customers and betrayed friends. They looked small and pathetic, their grand plans reduced to public humiliation and financial ruin. "This isn't over," Brady shouted, trying to push his way toward the stage. "I'll sue you for everything you have." "With what money?" I asked, stepping down from the stage to face him directly. "Your car's been repossessed, your office lease is in default, and every contractor in town is demanding payment for work you can't afford." "You destroyed my car." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said innocently, "but I hear fish can really damage a vehicle's resale value." Lydia grabbed my arm, her eyes desperate and pleading. "David, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can't we work this out privately?" I looked down at her, this woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams while planning to destroy both. "You said your family comes first," I reminded her. "Well, this community is my family now, and they deserve to know the truth about who they were trusting with their money and their faith." I gently removed her hand from my arm and stepped back, letting the crowd surge around them like a tide of righteous anger. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, raising my voice one final time, thank you for your attention. The festival can continue now. And remember, trust is earned, not given. Choose wisely who you give yours to. I walked away from the stage, through the crowd that parted respectfully to let me pass, leaving behind the chaos and the shouting and the wreckage of two lives that had been built on lies. Behind me, I could hear Brady and Lydia trying to explain themselves to people who were no longer interested in listening. Their voices grew fainter as I walked toward my truck, parked on the street beyond the park. Mrs. Walsh intercepted me at the edge of the crowd, her eyes bright with excitement and approval. "That was quite a performance, David," she said. "Your mother would have been proud." "Thank you, Mrs. Walsh. I hope so. What will you do now?" I looked back at the festival, where life was already returning to normal as people moved on from the drama to focus on funnel cakes and carnival games. Brady and Lydia had disappeared, probably slinking away to figure out how to rebuild their lives from the ashes of their ambitions. "Now I go back to work," I said. "There are a lot of broken things in this world that need fixing." I climbed into my truck and drove away from the park, away from the crowds and the chaos and the woman who'd thought she could make me second place in my own life. They'd said I was always second best, never quite good enough to be the star of my own story. But today, I'd been first. First to uncover the truth, first to expose the lies, and first to walk away from the wreckage with my dignity intact. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as I drove back to my shop, where a stack of broken electronics waited for my attention. Simple problems with clear solutions. The kind of work that made sense in a world where trust was a luxury and patience was a weapon. I had a business to run, a community to serve, and a future to build from the pieces of my old life. And for the first time in months, I was exactly where I wanted to be, in first place at last.